I'm sorry, Eunice. I'm sorry. I'll take care of it. Yeah, we start with 5. I know that part. Hello, everybody. That means you. It's your Uncle Joe wishing you a belated Happy New Year. I look back, I did 29 episodes of Joe Dungan's talk show last year. I wanted to do one more, make it even 30, but then I'm like, it's a number, who cares? You know, one was a clip show. There were a few shows that were two-parters, so it's not like I had 29 different guests. And then I thought, well, big deal. You know, if you feel like doing another one now, do it. If not, don't. And it's been a few weeks. It's time to do another one. So I buckled down this week and I got another episode in the can here. And, you know, I decided to be a little more optimistic about society and about the future because I'm at that age where I can start to see the finish line. You know what I mean? The party's going to end. It's one thing when you're, a kid, you're like, oh, death, that's way down there. I'll worry about it then. Start to think about it. So I'm starting to accelerate things. I'm starting to get a little bit impatient with life. I'm trying to catch up on all the stuff that I didn't do, make it go a little faster, try to just sort of force success, whether success wants to come or not. So I'm just kind of like, I'm just doing it. So that's kind of where I am right now. Plus, these back on Earth, I think these are called good habits. Maybe I should have been doing this the whole time. I'll talk more about that later as soon as I can think of what to say about it. In the meantime, my guest this week, first episode of 2022, Curt Bonnem. This cat, I've known this guy a long time. Actor, prolific actor. The guy did more plays than probably anybody I've ever known. And he made the transition not just from Los Angeles to Atlanta. And those of you in the entertainment industry, you might want to look into Atlanta. Apparently, it's where it's going. It's where it's happening. But he transitioned to audiobooks. He is now a working, busy audiobook actor. And it's satisfying his needs that he's not getting met through the theater. First there was the lockdown, and now he's busy with this, and he's kind of okay with not doing theater anymore. We go deep in the weeds on that. We talk about, the transition from the world of theater to the world of audiobooks. He goes into some of the nuts and bolts of how to make an audiobook, how he got started. I imagine you could replicate those steps if you wanted to get into the world of audiobooks. It's a pretty interesting world, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't thinking about it afterwards, because I started thinking about it. I'm going, I could do that, but I don't know. Should I? You're welcome to your opinion on that. Feel free to share it. Anyway, please enjoy this interview with the talented and prolific and gainfully employed Curt Bonnem. Curt Bonnem, good to see you again, man. How you been?
Hey, Joe, how's it going?
It's going good. I'm keeping busy. I'm doing several jobs at once. I'm a comedian. I'm a commercial actor now, too. Did you hear that news?
Have I seen you on anything?
I got a commercial agent. Yeah, I was recently on FXX networks promoting the Family Guy marathon over Christmas.
Really?
Yeah, that's my highest
on
profile.
Camera or voiceover?
On camera. It was these fake infomercials. I got a link, but I don't know if I'm allowed to make it public. I've tried to ask the guy, and I don't want to make waves, but I probably can.
It hasn't run yet, is what you're saying?
It ran. No, it ran over Christmas.
Oh, it ran.
So I probably can post it because
I would think so.
Yeah, but I just want to make sure. I don't know, but I'll post that anyway. It's I'm quite a talk show host. I start talking to my guest and I make it about myself. So
that's exciting. Congratulations.
It's a gift. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Commercials are great. That's how my wife made most of her money. So,
union or non-union?
Union.
Yeah, that's where the money is. I'm not there yet. I'm still going. Oh,
you're doing the buyouts, yeah.
Yeah, just like, wow, get more snacks before they shut down craft services.
Part of the reason I am here in Atlanta, or why we are here in Atlanta, is because the commercial industry changed so much in Los Angeles, and after a very long streak of doing really well, my wife, it was changing because like 80% of the commercials went non-union, so that kind of opened her up to getting out of there and trying
Yeah,
something new.
it's another. I'm not okay with it. I mean, I'm not condoning it. I'm glad for all my friends who made money in it over the years because we know some people who did well
Oh,
doing that
yes.
stuff. But I guess it's just society changes, things change, and I'm not condoning it, but nothing stays the same. You know.
Nothing stays the same, and it's just the state of things right now. And you keep moving along and do what you got to do.
Yeah, which is why I don't want to commit to one job because you never know. One job might go away. They might cancel stand-up comedy and I'll be screwed. I've got to
Yes,
try to.
diversify. That's the name of the game.
I think it makes you stronger. So anyway, we'll get to all of that. First of all, I want to say because we went to college together, and I think you acted in more plays than anybody I know.
That wouldn't surprise me. I that Well, and I'll probably talk about this when we start talking about audiobooks, but since the 5th grade when I did my first play, from that moment on, after opening night curtain call, I was like, this is what I want to do. And then from then on, I was in a play like all the time up until about, I don't know, the last play I did was literally right before the pandemic. Like, it closed the very beginning of February of 2020. And that's the last stage work I've done. This is the longest I've ever gone without being on stage.
How
So
many
yeah,
plays? How many plays do you think you did?
I don't know. I've meant to like go back and try and count, but it's a lot.
You
And
think it's
then
100?
I would imagine, so.
That's stunning. And for people who are not familiar with theater, you don't understand. Being in a play is an immense amount of work. It doesn't matter how big your role is. It doesn't matter if the play is any good. Just rehearsing it and then going up 3-4 nights a week for 4 or 6 weekends. And it's always on the weekend. It's not like you could do 2 at once. There are no plays that go Mondays and Tuesdays and then you can do the other one on weekends. You kind of can only
True.
do one at a time,
That is true. Never thought
usually.
about that, but yes.
So the fact that you can.
Although I actually have done more than one play at once uh, during the Hollywood Fringe Festival, and
Right.
that got a little crazy.
Yeah, there are moments like that where you do one here. It's like what, Tuesday at 3:40 in the afternoon, and then Saturday at
Yeah.
11 at night, and things like that.
Or like even in Los Angeles, there was one particular brief period where I was doing a production of Big River at one theater. I was doing a late night show at the Sacred Fools. It was right when I first started working at Sacred Fools, which I ended up becoming a member of. And then also got cast as a replacement in Louis and Keeley Live at the Sahara that was at the Geffen.
I saw that.
And so I was like doing Big River. This one weekend I was performing Big River, rehearsing and performing in the late night show, and rehearsing to go on the next Tuesday at the Geffen. And it was the greatest thing ever. I was so happy. Like it was intense, but it was awesome. I was definitely crazy that way.
Well, yeah, but but if you find your thing that works for you now, so I'll ask you, and we're bouncing around, and we'll get to everything. But how much do you miss acting in plays now?
It's kind of weird because we kind of we can now. Theater has been coming back. I actually finally went to the first live show a few months ago. But so it's been a couple of years that we were really even able to. So that sort of changed things. I haven't been like, oh, I have to get on stage because I can't get on stage. Now that we're sort of coming out of that, I've been thinking about it. I'm surprised I don't miss it more. I almost feel like it's been so long now. I'm almost a little nervous, like, oh, I haven't worked that muscle in so long when it was all the time nonstop. So there's that little bit of like, oh God, can I still do this? Do I know how to do this? And, as well as, like you said, it's a lot of time, which now having a job where I do get to perform, that takes up a lot of time, it would be a lot harder to do a show. Plus, the audiobooks really did, when I started doing audiobooks, they really did start to sate my need to be on stage.
Yeah, I would think so, because you're exercising in a way some of the same muscles.
100%.
So
100%.
let's get to that. So you started in Chicago, correct?
Yeah, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and the town I lived in, Elmhurst, had a really, really good children's theater program, and I moved there in the fourth grade. I don't remember if it was fourth or fifth, but in fifth grade, I think it was my parents will be a theme throughout this. I believe it was my parents that encouraged me to audition because they knew I liked to perform. I already played piano and would sing and stuff, and I must have been a little bit of a ham or something, because they were like, "Oh, you should audition for the theater thing." And I did, and I got a part in the chorus of Cinderella. And like I said, like, it was the thing I always think back on this now too is that children's theater program, the way it was run, everything about it, I learned everything about theater. It is exactly the same as any other theater I've ever done in my entire life, from the smallest one to the most professional. It had everything. It was basically a professional children's theater company, and so everything I did there, what ended up happening was, like, doing that was through eighth grade. You couldn't do it once you were past junior high. So I did shows, and you could only do one show a year with them. They did 3. So I then started doing, one show there, and then I would do the shows at my junior high and then do another show. So I did one every year for the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and gradually got bigger and bigger parts. And then was also doing the shows at my junior high as well. And yeah, like I said, that first night, it's funny because I think about it, and when I tell this story, I'm almost embarrassed, because it was curtain call that hooked me. But that's not why I like doing, that's not why I love theater. It's not for the applause at the end. But that moment, I mean, it's very distinct in my memory of standing out there with the line of the chorus members, we're first to come out, and taking a bow, and the audience cheering and applauding, and stepping back and watching all the other people go up and take their bows. And that was it. On stage that moment, I'm like, this is it. This is what I want to do. And I never stopped. Like, that was it. I really made that decision at that moment, and it never changed.
I believe it. I believe it, not because I've experienced it. I mean, I don't mean to sound like a weirdo, but the applause, I could kind of take relief.
Yeah, I mean, that's not why I like acting. Or even why I like, I guess I do partially what I love about theater is the immediate reaction, that interaction with the audience. But it's not the applause. It's not it's not the curtain call that does it, but it's that constant feedback, and that, really being able to kind of have that give and take with an audience that's so much different than any other type of acting. I always say, well, the thing that I like to say is, so TV is a writer's and producer's medium. Film is a director's and editor's medium. And theater is the only actor's medium. Because once those lights go up, the curtains open, that's it. Like, it's actors. You could do whatever you want.
They can't.
Hopefully you don't, but
they can't cut it out. They can't edit that out. But you're talking about the audience interaction, because, I mean, at least when I do stand up, I will pivot. I don't know how many times, even in a 5-minute set, I'm constantly rewriting, and I'll start a sentence and just go somewhere else with it. But in theater, you rehearsed it. The director wants a certain pacing. He wants a certain cadence. You've been drilling it over and over again with the actor. How much does an audience's energy inform your performance on any given night? Do you find yourself altering things a little bit?
Well, I think that's actually a dangerous thing. Certainly with comedy, even, scripted comedy, when you're doing it over and over in front of an audience, Well, just like with your stand-up, when you do the same jokes, you'll find the things that land and the ways to do it that will land properly. So certainly in comedy with theater, you can get that feedback and maybe adjust your performance as you discover, like, oh, the timing of this joke or this physical movement or something lands better. So that's one way it can actually inform your actual performance. But I think it can also be really dangerous to allow an audience to make you change what you've been working towards. And I have certainly made the mistake of doing that, and it's not worked out well. Like, in general, you should go for what you have rehearsed and been working on for that long. And certainly things organically can change. And with any acting, especially live performance, things will change purely just based on the moment that's happening on stage, especially depending on the actors you're with. If you have actors who are a little more free, not necessarily like improv or anything, but in the way that they will respond, they might respond differently to the way, you've said something. And that's actually when the most interesting stuff can happen, when you're really listening and responding and allow that to take you. But it'll never step that far outside what you've rehearsed. I mean, it shouldn't,
Yeah, it sounds really subtle, because it sounds like the kind of thing that an audience wouldn't pick up unless they go see the same show 2 or 3 times, and then they can start to notice different
Right.
adjustments and things. So,
And sometimes people go to shows numerous times because they want to see the exact same thing.
isn't that nuts?
Yeah.
I would think they would enjoy the little differences, so then they can talk about it afterwards. Oh, they did it
And
differently
usually they
this time.
do. Well, just like when somebody screws up on stage, that's usually when the audience is the most with you. Like, they love that. They feel like they're a part of something unique happening, and they get to witness this thing. So yeah, there's
Which
that.
better in some shows than others. I mean, if you screw up in the producers, I'm sure everyone's like, "Oh, it's a comedy anyway, fine." Or when you did
Right.
Forum, that lends itself to all kinds of slapstick. So
Absolutely.
there, just improvise your way around it.
Yeah.
So, at what point did you come to California?
Right out of high school, I I mean, I loved Chicago. Chicago's a great city, and the suburbs where I grew up were awesome. But I had 18 years of that winter, and I was pretty much done with that. And then also, my sister had moved to California several years before. She went to San Jose State, and then she moved down to LA and was living in Venice Beach at the time. And I had visited her, and I fell in love with California in general, and Los Angeles, and like being down on Venice Beach. One of the things that struck me was like wandering the boardwalk there and seeing all the freaks and being like, oh, like you can be whatever you want, like, and nobody's going to judge you. It doesn't matter. And that appealed to me. I was like, cool, you can just kind of be who you are. And she was in the movie industry. So it seemed like, all right, well, I want to be an actor. It's like New York or LA, which is a decision I've always wondered about, because I was basically a musical theater guy growing up. And who knows? I don't know what would have happened had I gone to New York, but I chose Los Angeles, and as you know, went to Cal State Northridge, which was awesome. I'm actually really glad I ended up choosing CSUN. I was looking at UCLA and USC, which, aside from the fact they were way too expensive, one of the things was that I realized about CSUN after getting there and like getting going was like, at CSUN, you immediately could be working. You could immediately do shows and stuff, where at some of these other schools, like, you had to wait till you were an upperclassman to really do anything. And so that was awesome. I mean, I literally got to LA that day, auditioned for Caucasian Chalk Circle, and got in. And then, I mean, and I attribute that to so much too, because I mean, that was such an intensive show. We rehearsed so much. I was rehearsing 6 days a week. So it was like immediate group of friends and, tribe. So, and then, as you said, like, I did shows nonstop. at CSUN. So it was great. And I only found out later that my mom didn't realize I was never coming back. Like, not for summers or anything. I'm like, no, I'm moving here and this is what I'm doing now. Like, so yeah, I just up and drove across the country and moved to LA, and that was it. And fell in love with Los Angeles. I mean, I still love it, and I honestly never thought I would leave. And I certainly never thought I would be living in the South, but
No,
here I am.
who would have guessed that? And we'll get to that move, but I mean, I'm going to indulge ourselves for a minute here about the CSUN days because they were fun.
Yeah.
And I hope I appreciated them enough when I was there, because I acted a little. I was in a few things. You and I were in a play together.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have any scenes together, but we were in Happy Birthday Wanda June by
Yep.
Curt Vonnegut.
That was the next to last show I did at CSUN, yes.
And that was a fun
right
time
before
because
Forum.
in the middle of rehearsing that show, we all went to Vegas
That's right, yes.
for some reason. I don't know why, but all of us, or most of us, just filled 3 cars and drove to Vegas for 2 nights.
Yeah, but why did we do that? Was
I
it
don't
we just
I
decided
don't
like we were
know.
gonna have a little like outing?
Because we were in our early 20s and we could get in casinos. We're like,
Yeah.
fuck it, let's go. So we stayed at the King 8 Motel,
Mm-hmm.
which was $20 a night. 4
I
people to a
believe
room.
I've stayed there since too.
You have?
Probably anytime I found a good cheap motel in Vegas, I would utilize it.
I gotta. If you want, I'll hunt it down. I don't think the King 8 is there anymore. I've looked for it. I forgot what street.
That
it was
was off the strip, right?
Yes, it was west of the Strip. I want to say Flamingo or one of those.
Was it not Flamingo,
Tropicana?
Tropicana.
Was it?
Yes. I believe it was Tropicas. There's Flamingo was the cross street with Caesars and all that, right?
Right.
It was the next one farther. That was Tropicana, I believe. Yes.
It was a wacky 48 hours. And then a friend of mine actually stayed. Where did he stay? I think he stayed at some hotel that the whole place reeked of smoke. And I think the Foo Fighters spent the night there once and destroyed a room or something. I forgot what it was. It was like near the Hard Rock or something. And if you want, I'll hunt that down. I got to ask him what it was, but he went there for some reason. Anyway, I don't know why I went off on that tangent. That was fun times though. I kind of wish it would just keep going. But then the idea of going to Vegas for 2 days now, I'm tired. Fuck it. I don't want to.
That's something I miss about Los Angeles is being able to drive to Vegas.
Yeah, there's no equivalent to that in Atlanta?
No. There's no equivalent to Vegas. Well, I suppose Atlantic City.
Well, how far are you from Biloxi?
I don't know.
I take it you've never gone.
No.
Because I hear that's a nice little getaway on the Gulf Coast.
Yeah, I actually, especially because like half the time I've been here was on lockdown. So I have yet to really travel around much here in the South, but there's definitely places that I would like to go. I love Nashville. I did a musical there that started in LA, a small theater show in LA, and then went to TPAC, which is the Tennessee Performing Arts Center in downtown Nashville, the big theater there. And so I spent 2 months in Nashville when I already knew I was going to move to Atlanta. And so, my wife and I came and hung out in Atlanta and then drove up to Nashville. And then I spent 2 months there and absolutely loved it. Nashville is awesome. It was awesome. I was, I was in a bit of a bubble, like getting paid and staying in a cool place and doing a show at the big theater and but I had a blast. It was just so much fun and super cool town, especially if you like music. And it's not just country, it's everything. So I just every night would go out and see bands and, it was awesome. So I got excited about that. I was like, oh, okay, South. Cool. I like this. This is great. And I had visited Atlanta, and Atlanta's a super cool city, and this is one of the things you hear about the South, like the cities are different than the rest of it. Mm-hmm. Like here in Georgia, you have Atlanta for the most part, and then a lot of the rest of the state is, kind of what you might expect. But Atlanta's it's a great city. A lot going on. Huge art scene, theater scene,
TV scene.
obviously big music.
And they're doing more television in Georgia these days.
Well, that's why I came. Like, once again, my sister came here first.
Okay.
And she was like a Venice Beach girl. She still actually owns her house in Venice. But she really surprised me. She came and worked on Halt and Catch Fire, the AMC show, for 6 months, and then went back to LA, and then came back for the next season, and she's never left. She literally has not even been back to LA. She said, done with LA. She loved Atlanta, loved the vibe here, loved the film scene, which was being shot here than anywhere in the world. And coming from LA, especially someone like my sister with the kind of experience she has, there weren't hardly any people here that had the kind of experience. So, she worked nonstop in LA too, but it's been nonstop here. And it's just a very different vibe. It's just not as stressful. And there's more excitement about the film industry here than LA, which is, because people get jaded, and I'm sure it'll eventually happen to Atlanta. But, right now it's still very vibrant, and people are excited, and a lot of stuff's happening. And opportunity-wise was like light years for me. I actually, by the time I left LA, I didn't have a theatrical agent for years. It was like impossible to get one. At that point, I didn't even have a commercial agent. It used to be you could just like get a referral and go in and you get a commercial agent. I couldn't even get an interview with referrals from like their big bookers. Everything changed. So I was mostly just doing small theater, and then I was doing more and more equity theater, which was nice to get paid, but it's still it's a tough way to make a living. That's for sure. I wasn't.
It doesn't pay a lot.
Yeah. And my sister came and she was bugging me. Like, the work, there's tons of work here. They need people. They need people with experience. And luckily, my wife jumped on it as well. She was my fiance at the time. I did not think she was going to want to leave. Even at that time, she was still going out commercially like 4 or 5 times a week. But just stuff wasn't happening, and then residuals were ending and stuff. And, it was just a lot changing. And she thought, yeah, let's go. And so we did. And I've had more and better auditions in the years I've been here than my entire time in Los Angeles.
Isn't that wild?
And it's different. It's all on tape, which it's changing in LA now too. And obviously with COVID, that certainly pushed that farther, but mostly on tape. I've had a few live auditions, but it's mostly on tape, and there's just so much going on, and it was a piece of cake to get an agent. It was so different than Los Angeles, and the vibe was just totally different. And auditions all the time, and so it was a good move. We're very happy. And now, since we've been here, probably a dozen of our friends from LA or people we know have moved here too.
Oh yeah, no one's moving to Los Angeles. We've lost so many comedians and actors who are going to Austin or Atlanta or New Mexico or Phoenix or Vegas.
More and more all the time. We have another couple of friends who are going to be moving here in another few months, and it's just
and also LA. Everything you remember about LA has been exaggerated. It's gotten worse. Homelessness has gotten worse.
That's what we hear from everyone.
Housing prices have gotten worse.
Yeah, crazy.
I don't get it. It's you look at the supply and demand economics of it, it makes no sense because people are leaving. LA is definitely getting depopulated. The only thing that's better is the traffic is actually a little better.
Wow.
It's noticeably better, but not great, but it still sucks.
That's one thing we were warned about in Atlanta, which was funny before we got here. Everybody says, oh, the traffic in Atlanta. And I'm like, I just spent 30 years in Los Angeles, I think. And it's not as bad as Los Angeles. There is bad traffic, but it's like it was like growing up in Chicago where there's a rush hour in the morning and in the evening, and it's bad. The rest of the time, it's perfectly fine. In Los Angeles, you can be at a dead stop on the 101 at 2 a.m. Like,
Yeah,
there's
and
traffic
that still
all the time.
happens. That still happens. They
Yeah.
will mercifully, they will do freeway construction, between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m.
Yeah.
But if they shut down enough lanes, you can still bottleneck. And I've done that. I've come home from parties where I'm exhausted. I'm 10 minutes away from home, and 10 minutes turns into 30 minutes
Yeah.
because they're doing traffic at Woodman. Like, oh, really? They gotta
Yeah.
do more construction again? Like, how long?
Yeah,
is
I
it
had
gonna take?
8 years of commuting from North Hollywood to, well, first it was Santa Monica, which
Oh,
was really bad.
oh,
Yeah, that was the worst. And then we moved to still the west side of the 405, but in Culver City. So it was a little better. And then we moved to the east side of the 405 in Culver City. And that was a lot better, but still, like, that commute every day for 8 years was a lot. I mean, it's just so much time. It's just like so much of
it's
your life.
ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You know what gets me through are audiobooks, oddly enough.
Yep.
I did a gig a couple weeks ago up in Clovis, which is near Fresno. And I drove up one nighter, drove up there, and it went great. I spent the night in a hotel, and I'm coming back. And that was the day of the big snowstorm that closed down the Interstate 5 over the Tejon Pass. Now, okay, fine, the 101 is open and you can take the 14, that's open. The problem is they can't handle all the traffic. So a 3-hour ride took me 6.5 hours because
Yeah.
everybody's bottlenecking on the 58. And an audiobook got me through. I was listening to Mel Brooks, his book, which he narrates. And as
Mhm.
somebody said, it's like having him riding shotgun, which was wonderful. And he's telling me
Yeah.
stories
Yeah.
about blazing saddles and shit. I'm going, I get it. I love it. This is amazing. Let me ask you something. When you left LA, because I've lived in LA my whole life, and the thought of moving out of LA is just so foreign to me because this is my home.
Yeah.
How much of you, after 30 years in LA, how much of you said to yourself, I don't know if I can do this. I don't really want to do this because I love this city.
You know, I think maybe it's just how I am. Like when I left where I grew up, it wasn't honestly that I didn't want to stay there at all. I loved it. Like I said, like winter sucked, but I'm more of, it's weird because I'm a nester. I'm definitely a nester. I like being where I'm at. I like if I move into a place in 3 days, I make it feel like I've lived there for 10 years. And I don't like to move. At the same time, I'm not really sentimental. I don't think really. And when I've like decided something and like, especially this time with the move here, it was a lot of it was because of my wife. Like, had she not jumped on it and started making it happen, and I mean, it also was a financial thing. At that time, I really did not have much money. She had a house that she owned in Los Angeles and had money from commercials and stuff, and so she had the ability to move us, basically. Had that not happened, it would have been a lot more difficult. But because that was all possible, once it got going, I like never really thought twice about it. It was just like, all right, new adventure, here we go. Like,
That's
and
that's I think it's fantastic because it seems like there are no hangups with you making decisions. And that's what this show is all about. I'm fascinated by everybody making life decisions because every time I have to make a decision, I'm crippled. I'm just going, wait, what? Do I have what? Wait a minute. Chicken or fish? I can't get both. What, that's me. I'm just kind of
yeah,
like, what do I do?
I mean,
So the fact that you can pick up a
I'm not great at making decisions, but when they're kind of made for me, I'm then it's much easier.
yeah. Now,
Um,
when you moved to Atlanta, did you have, I know your sister said, get out here. There's gold lying in the streets. Did you have a job lined up or did you just say, well, if the gold's lying in the streets, to hell with it. I'll just give it a try.
no, I didn't. Well, I mean, I guess, yes, I did have a job by that point because I had started doing audiobooks in that same year. And by the time we moved, I was doing them consistently. So I did technically have a job, that I could I mean, but it is independent work, so I'm not like employed by someone, but I was doing it consistently. So I did sort of have a job. And also, again, my wife had money that would that made it a lot easier for us to be able to make this move without having to worry too much. Although she did buy and renovate the house that we're in, and, that cost a lot of money. So it wasn't even like, oh, it's not, and she ended up getting a day job here after a little bit too. But we were auditioning immediately, which was nice. Not booking a ton, but lots of auditions. I've booked a couple things. She's done a couple of things too. So sort of had a job. But that's another thing when we get to, really talking audiobooks. It's another thing I love about doing the audiobook work is it took a lot of pressure off worrying about getting on-camera work. Like, I don't have to, I'm not stressed to try and book a gig, like I have a gig that I love and I'm acting. So like it's kind of cake if I book an on-camera gig, that's great. So it's made it a lot more relaxed for me.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's one thing if you're 22 and like, well, I'll stay in a hostel in, LA and with my $10 in my pocket. But, you get to our age, you're like, I don't want to do that shit. Give me a soft landing somewhere. Let's talk about how you got started in audiobooks. Did someone come to you? Did you say, I want a regular gig? How did this begin?
So it came through doing theater. I mean, I had, in Los Angeles, many of us have for decades heard about the wonderful and mysterious world of voiceover. It was always sort of like the holy grail of like, ooh, there's these people that make a lot of money doing voiceover work. Who are they? And for a long time, it was a very few, like a handful of people that really did the majority of that. And I was always interested in it. But it was one of those things that's like, oh, there's this, gotta get a demo and then another agent for that. And I don't really understand it. I don't know it. And so I passed up a couple of opportunities over the years to like get into voiceover. But it was always something I was like interested in, like checking out at some point. I took some voiceover classes and things like that. And then in was it 2016? I think it was it was probably 2016. I played Sherlock Holmes in Hound of the Baskervilles at the oh my gosh, I'm suddenly forgetting the Actors Co-op Theater, right off the 101 there by Cahuenga. And that was a blast, and it was great. And I didn't realize at the time when I was doing it, actually, but a few of my castmates one of them in particular was a really big guy in voiceover. He was one of the Mutant Ninja Turtles from the cartoon. He was Jay Leno's promo voice the whole time. Like, he was a huge name in voiceover. I had no idea. I didn't know voiceover at the time. I didn't realize. And then there was a couple of other people. My Watson was doing audiobooks, which I only found out after the fact when I saw him posting about it on Facebook. And I saw him post things like, oh, just got my 11th book for the year, blah, whatever, and saw pictures of him going to the Audiobook Awards in New York and the convention and stuff. And on one of his posts, now I've listened to audiobooks for a long time. My mother was always really into books on tape back when they were actually called books on tape.
A giant book of cassettes that you put into your car. Yeah,
exactly. We had those things in the car and on trips and stuff. We would listen to audiobooks. So my mother was always a big fan. At that point too, my dad was a big fan of audiobooks. And I knew I liked them and stuff, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So I commented on his post like, oh, I'd love to find out about that, you know? And he commented back and said, sure, you know, like anytime you want to talk, you know, let's go have lunch. Like, I'm happy to like tell you about it. I didn't do that. I totally let that go. But I had told my parents about it, and they immediately were like, you have to talk to him. You'd be great at this. You do all these accents and voices, and like, you'd be great at this. You should. And I think part of it too was like, he was making money. Like, you can make money doing this. Like,
steady acting work.
yes, and it is. So I had told them, and they were like, you got to do it. And I didn't initially. And then like a year later, probably, I saw him posting again, and I mentioned it to my parents again. And it was my parents that really got on me. They were like, you have to do this. You have to talk to him. You've got to look into this. And then they said the magic words, and we'll even help pay for like equipment and stuff to like get you started. Like if you need like help, I'm like, okay, all right, deal. Like, all right. Cause at the time I was like doing like Instacart. In fact, at the time, I think I wasn't doing Instacart. I think that was over, and I really didn't have much work at all. I was sort of like just floating around doing kind of whatever here and there. And it was the December of 2017, and so I started like, I just looked online at everything I could find about audiobooks. There's a few places in particular that are like, there's a site called ACX, which is Audible's platform for narrators and independent authors to hook up. It's like a dating site for authors and narrators, where you can go and put up a profile for free and audition for books that are looking for narrators, or people can contact you and things like that. And I went there and I read all the stuff there, and I just sort of started delving into it, as well as I did go and talk to my friend. We went and had lunch, and he told me about his whole experience and what he was doing. And my wife went to see her mother in New York over Christmas that year. So she was gone for about, 6 days. And so in that 6 days, I built a booth, my first like little, like sound booth, bought the equipment, built the booth, got everything set up, and like was ready to like get going. And I also decided at the same time, like, well, since I'm doing this, like, I'm going to start looking into voiceover in general too. So I signed up for a voiceover class, and I just like, in fact, it was probably about this time, 2018, like right about now, that I started my first audiobook. So I put up my profile on that site, ACX, and put up my very first sample on like January 2nd of 2018. The next day, I got contacted by a company that asked if I wanted to be on their narration roster, and said, sure. And within a couple of weeks, they gave me my first book. Now, granted, and all of my audiobook friends out there, this is a big topic, rates and stuff is a big topic in the VO world, as it is in commercial, like non-union commercial work and all that kind of stuff. And this company was paying a very, very low rate, like ends up being much less than minimum wage, especially when you're new and you're learning, because it takes a lot more time to record a book when you're first starting.
Now, but you're also thinking, this is my first one, I got to get something here.
Well, I was really excited to get started and thrilled that I immediately got some work, and it did pay. as little as it was, it did pay. So I'm like, okay, like I'm making a little money. And that just didn't stop. It's interesting because I actually teach an audiobook class at the Atlanta Voiceover Studio now. And so I'm teaching this stuff to students. And when we get to this about like rates and stuff, I talk about how this happened. Now, I don't encourage anyone to do audiobooks for $50 per finished hour. That's one thing with audiobooks is the way you're paid. There's a couple of ways, but the main way you are paid is called per finished hour, which is what it sounds like. It's not how much you're recording, it's that finished product. So you might record for 60 hours and then end up with a 10-hour finished book and you get paid for 10 hours. So when you're talking $50, $75 per finished hour, and at the time I started, my ratio of work time to a finished hour was like 10 to 12 hours per one finished hour, which is not unusual at all for people brand new to it, especially if you're doing your own editing and things like that and not outsourcing that. So think about that. That's like nothing. It's like sub-minimum wage work. So I don't encourage people to do that. But at the same time, it was sort of a really fortuitous thing. It was at a time when I didn't have a job. I had time to do it. I was able to sort of invest myself in it. And I was making a little bit of money, so that kept me going. And then this company just kept sending me books. And they were actually decent. There were some decent titles. Like, it wasn't just crap work. A lot of times people may start off and take what's called royalty share projects where you're literally, you're only making money if it sells and you're sharing in the profits.
That sounds dicey.
It's actually fun. I know people that make their entire monthly nut with royalty share stuff that they've done. It's a passive income, but you have to have titles that make money.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of, this is a whole other area of audiobooks. There are a lot of scammers out there that it's hard to explain, but they take advantage, particularly of new narrators, and will either do royalty share or really super low rates for books that aren't even theirs or are basically just like Google translated like other books. Like, there's all sorts of stuff. They've cracked down a lot on that now, so there's a lot less of it. But luckily, this company was sending me like real legit titles, and they weren't just like little 3-hour long like self-help books, which is another thing that happens that's in some of this scam stuff. They were like real full-length novels and of all different genres, and they just kept sending me one after another. So I got a lot of experience very quickly. I was building up a portfolio very quickly, and I knew immediately, like, I really loved it. It was, this brings me back to the, like, not doing theater as much. I realized it was sating my need to perform because I got to perform. Like, an audiobook, you get to play all the parts. Like, that's an actor's dream, I
want to talk about this. Like, the mechanics of doing a book. Did they just give you a manuscript and say, go, you have 6 weeks to give us a recording? Did they give you a synopsis of each character? Do they give you direction as you go? Or how does the day-to-day of this go?
All of that. I mean, there's all of that. So I would say the majority of the work that I've done, and this is probably the majority of work that most narrators, most just like working narrators do, is, there's several ways you get work, whether it's through a site like ACX where you're hooking up with an independent author, and it's really sort of your own thing. You're working directly with the rights holder, whether that's the author or somebody that holds the rights to that book or is working with the author. There's no agents in this industry. Like, you're not going through agents and things like that. It's all totally self-done. Some people also reach directly out to authors. They find things online that interest them that they see doesn't have an audiobook, and they'll reach out to the author and pitch them. And there's a lot of people get a lot of work that way. And then the other thing is working for publishers, which is, you know, that's when I started in particular, that was sort of the goal, is like work with publishers. And that is what ended up really kicking it into gear for me, was after I got my first publisher, and they sent me a lot of work very consistently. And it was union, because we can talk about that too. Audiobooks have their own whole thing with union and versus non-union work. So usually, especially for people working from home studios, which is the vast majority of audiobook narration at this point, is done through home studios. Usually you get a book, and then if you do have contact with the author, you might get them to give you some stuff like synopses or character breakdowns, pronunciation stuff. You try to. It's always better when you're able to get as much info as you can. A lot of the times with the publishers, you get nothing. You get the manuscript, and that's it.
Now, are they automatically happy with your work because, well, he's a professional, he knows what he's doing? Or do they listen to it going, no, you've got this voice wrong?
Well, with publishers, I've never had that with a publisher, because generally publishers, they're cranking out a lot of stuff, and, you know, they're not really listening for the quality of the performance. If you've gotten with them, they've already heard your work. You know, in order to get in with a publisher, they're going to listen to the stuff you've done. They're going to listen to samples. Usually you have to sort of audition, usually send them samples. So they will already have an idea of what you can do, which is also how they cast. You know, it's like casting anything else with the publishers. They have people who do casting. And so it's their job to like know the strengths of the narrators that they work with. And usually you fill out a profile where you list the accents you can do and, you know, the things you're good at. And also a lot of it has to do with your just general life experience. They really love trying to cast people that can connect with the material. Like, I just got my first book with a publisher that I've really wanted to work with for years now. And I think they must have done it because I'm sure in my profile for them, I talked about juggling and variety stuff and all that stuff that I do. And this book takes place in the circus. So I'm like, they probably did their search and went, oh, here's the narrators that like have something that's that. Oh, okay. Like this. So now, even with publishers, you can ask, you can say, hey, are you in contact with the author? Sometimes they don't even have any, you know, they've just bought the rights. The author has nothing to do with it anymore, and it's just them. So sometimes you can't even get that. Sometimes you can ask, like, hey, can I get anything from the author? And sometimes it'll be, yeah, sure, let me talk to them. And then they'll send you all that stuff or not, or some of it, or, and a lot of times it's nothing. A lot of times you get the manuscript and then you're on your own to make your own choices.
And did they just automatically approve your first edit, or is there a voice director that steps in at a certain point?
Well, that's another thing. I've actually never done a book with no, that's not true. This past year, I did do my first directed session, and it was for a multicast children's book. So it wasn't like doing a full book, but there are audiobook directors, and that's, you're usually doing that with, you know, the bigger publishers, particularly if you're doing them in-house, like in a studio somewhere. That is much less common now, again, especially because of COVID. And a lot of times now they're doing remote directed sessions. So yes, there are directors for audiobooks, but that's probably a minority of the total amount of audiobooks that are released. that actually get directors. That's one of the big parts of being a narrator, is knowing how to self-direct, and taking coaching and, working on the craft to be able to do that well. And it's one of the things that a lot of people struggle with,
Sure.
self-doubt and second guessing, or being too much of a perfectionist, like re-recording stuff like, oh, I didn't like that enough. And you have to learn how to let that go, or else you'll never get finished, and you won't make the kind of ROI you need to make it worthwhile. Audiobooks they're a marathon, but they're unlike other like short form VO work where you can do a whole bunch of takes. You're not going to consistently be stopping and starting to redo a performance. Otherwise, you're never going to finish. There's a lot of stopping and starting because you make mistakes. That's just how it is. But if you get too precious about getting it right, you're just going to take too long, and you're not going to make a living at it. You have to eventually get to where you're confident enough, or just don't worry about it. Like, just do it. And that's a struggle for a lot of people. I haven't really felt that way. Luckily, I think part of it had to do with, there are a lot of narrators that came from theater backgrounds and other acting backgrounds, because it is a performance art. It's acting. The best narrators are fantastic actors. And so the very first book I did was this like thriller, really cool book. And I didn't have any specific audiobook training at that point, just listening to them. And I just did what I do. I just performed the book how I felt like I would perform this book. And a lot of people talk, and a lot of narrators are like, oh God, I listened back to my first book, and I'm like, I'm still very proud of that one. And in fact, I was a lot more like that first one in particular. I was really free because I had nothing. I had none of this, like, here's how you should do it. Like, here's the proper way to do this and that. I was just doing it. And once I started like getting coaching and taking classes and like learning more about like what you're supposed to do, I started to get myself messed up. I think I got worse at first, which is what happens with like sports. That'll happen. You like tweak your golf swing, and then you're crap for months until it like sinks in and you can like integrate it.
Yeah,
And
my best stand-up is when I'm in the moment, when I'm not focusing on how the joke should be phrased, and the outrage is coming out, and I'm just improvising. That's the best stuff.
Well, exactly. It's all acting, I feel, is that way. When you're in the moment and you're just letting it flow. Same with sports. That word flow, like athletes are at their peak when they're not thinking about it, which is why you train for years to get to the point where you don't have to think about it.
Yeah, that's like your first audiobook. I would say that's 40 years of theater going into your first audiobook right there. That's probably why that.
And I know that made a huge difference in why I've been successful at it. I think it's a lot harder for people that come at it without an acting background. I know very, very successful narrators who didn't have any acting background at all, and they're very successful narrators. But I think people like that, they have a steeper learning curve, and it takes longer to get there. I mean, I don't know. I know people that started at the same time as me with no acting background who are now like hugely successful, and they're way more successful than me, own their own production companies and stuff, which is a whole other thing, that's a whole other thing.
One more question just about the nuts and bolts of this.
Yeah.
When you're playing a bunch of different characters, is there a rule on how much you need to differentiate between one and another? Because we can all tell it's Curt reading it. So how do you don't sound like a woman in this one and something. Well, how do you make it?
Well, it depends on the narrator. I mean, have you listened to any of Jim Dale's Harry Potter?
I have not.
I mean, there are narrators like him. There are narrators that highly differentiate, like you wouldn't know it's the same person. Um, that is so it's sort of a personal preference, really, as a narrator, how you approach it. There's sort of two and a half schools of approaching narration performance, audiobook narration performance. One is not really doing voices, not really doing voices. Again, it's about the acting. One of the most successful, highly respected audiobook narrators is a guy named Scott Brick. He's right there in LA as well. And he doesn't do a ton of voices. It's more the acting choices. And, it's very subtle, the shifts. He doesn't do a lot of, he does a couple of accents and he does them very lightly and it's not very often, but not a ton of differentiation in voices. It's more just in the performance, in the style, in the motivation of the character. You differentiate character based on who they are and what they want and what type of person are they. And that shifts the voice just enough that you know who's talking. So that's sort of one branch of audiobook performance. And then there's the other side, which is you really differentiate. You do all the accents, you do different vocal styles, you do different character voices and all this stuff. I'm much more on that end, and that's just where I came from. Like I was a character actor. I did a lot of multi-role tracks in shows where I'd play 12 different parts, and that was always the thing I loved the most, was like becoming a totally different person on stage, to where afterwards people would go, wait, that was you? Wait, that was you too? I mean, to me, that's the greatest compliment. I have a really hard time not doing that. Like, I've tried to dial it back and just do a more straight sort of narration where I'm not doing huge, and I can't do it. Like, I have a character comes up and I need to give them a different voice. Like,
it sounds like you don't have to, though. I mean, if you're saying
that
two different schools of thought are absolutely fine, just lean into your strengths.
Absolutely. And it's the same for listeners. There are some listeners that absolutely hate when people do voices and really do that. They want that just sort of simple narration. And then there are some listeners that can't stand that style and they want somebody. I'm one of those. Like, I want to hear differentiation in voices. That's what I enjoy. Not that I don't like the other style. I have heard books done that way that I absolutely love. Actually, one of my very favorite narrators, this guy Grover Gardner, he's absolutely phenomenal. He narrated The Stand, Stephen King's The Stand. And I tell my students, I'm like, to me, that's an example of a near perfect fiction narration. And he doesn't really do huge voices. He's just a phenomenal performer and just a great actor. And he has a really interesting style. And, he's just a great storyteller. And that's really what it comes down to. It's storytelling, But personally for me, I do voices. I like to really get into the parts and differentiate. And it's also part of how you market yourself as a narrator. I market myself as someone who can do a lot of accents and things like that. So, I've done books that have, 12, 15 different accents. So it's kind of personal style, personal preference, and what the book calls for, what they want from it. And there are definitely authors who don't want, they'll tell you, no, I want a very straight narration. I do. Usually when that happens, I tend to try and avoid it now because I'm probably not going to get it. It's just not me. So when they tell me they like big voices, I'm like, great. I'm
Well,
your
but
guy.
I think that's part of the job of the artist also, is knowing when to say no. I mean, I've turned down shows. Oh, it's a dirty show. I'm like, oh, I'm not a dirty comic. Fine. There's plenty of filthy comedians. I just no.
Yeah.
I mean, I could take the money, but it's not my thing. So it sounds like you're doing everything right. And congratulations on all your successes. I wanted to chat with you for a while and find out how you got here, and now I know. So good on you, man. How can people find you? How can people find samples of your work and so on?
Well, there's a couple of ways. I have a narration specific website, which is very easy. It's narratedby.me. I was glad I found that.
Yeah, that wasn't taken. Good for you.
I know. I was actually very surprised. And of course, there's people that are like, you should have your name in it. I'm like, this is a good, narrated by me. I also have my voiceover site, which is curtbonnemvo.com, which will also lead you there. You can also search my name on Audible to find my titles. I do have one pseudonym, which is Brad King, although there is a Brad W. King. But Brad King is my gay male romance pseudonym. I don't hide it. It's actually the name of a character I played in a gay web series.
Well, I'm glad your pseudonym is out of the closet, Curt.
Yeah.
Very
And
proud
that's
of you.
the thing. Like, some people are very protective of their pseudonyms, and no one knows who that person is. And then some people don't care. But it's a very common thing to separate like romance, erotica with a pseudonym. I don't care. I only did that pseudonym, and I actually kind of regret it because I don't care. Like, it's not that I didn't want people to see it. I thought it would be like a fun little like thing because there's the character that I played in this show, and he has fans, and like, oh yeah, that'd be fun. And I'm like, now, like, I'd rather just have those titles under my own name so you can see them all and everything, but whatever.
Yeah, life is all about trade-offs, man.
Yeah.
Congratulations. I would raise a glass to you, but I drank it all, so I'll raise an empty glass to you. Cheers, man.
Cheers.
Great talking to you, man. Great catching up with you.
Absolutely.
Congrats on everything, and I will talk to you soon, dude. Take care.
Excellent. You too.
There you have it. Curt Bonnem. Guy loved theater, did it for decades. Money started to dry up. He didn't panic. He didn't despair. He said, let's explore something new. And guess what? The audiobook narration guy that he did a show with was there in his life. It's what happens when you keep showing up. There's other avenues, other doors open. He said, I'm going to go down this path. And he applied himself. He did the work. He applied his skill set. He did all the steps. He had the resources. He, took the baby steps. He got the equipment. He did the demos. He did what you were supposed to do. And it took a little while, but he's got a career. He's thriving. That's what happens when you apply yourself. This is what happens when you show up for yourself. I showed up for myself today. I went for a walk. I incorporated a little jogging. My plantar fasciitis is going away thanks to drugs. Just taking a anti-inflammatory, actually. I have it. I'm taking it for frozen shoulder. I'm frozen shoulder years old, everybody. I got frozen shoulder. I have to start taking prescription strength anti-inflammatories, and I have to start physical therapy. But hey, could be worse. Happy that the rest of me works. So I had a shower, had a shave, and I'm showing up for myself with good hygiene. I think that's worth something. And now I'm going to show up for myself by putting this show together and putting it on the YouTube so you all can watch it. And I'm going to write jokes again. Been writing jokes every day this year. That's a first. Never done that. Never made it to the 14th of the year writing jokes every day, but I've been doing that. Been reading, been meditating, cutting back on the sauce. It's baby steps. Baby steps. And eventually I will get to an age where I can cry like a baby.
Are we clear? I'm sorry. Have you been crying this whole time?
I thought I heard a little whimpering in the background.
Yeah, that must have been her. Okay. Look, I'm really sorry. We'll talk. We'll go to HR and talk. Okay, or Stuckies, whichever.